Hello friends, Dr. Bob here. Today I want to share a deeply personal story that could potentially save your life or the life of someone you love. 3 years ago, my 89-year-old mother forgot her critical heart medication while visiting my sister in Florida. What happened next taught me a valuable lesson about medication management during travel that I wish I'd known during my 35 years as a pharmacist. The emergency system we developed not only saved her from a dangerous cardiac situation, but has since become something I recommend to all my former patients and friends who travel. I still remember the phone call. It was a Tuesday evening, and I was practicing with my senior jazz band when my phone rang. It was my sister Catherine, her voice tense with worry. "Bob," she said, "Mom just realized she left her heart medication at home. All of it. Her digoxin, her blood thinner, everything. What should we do? My mother, who has atrial fibrillation and heart failure, needs these medications daily. Missing even a few doses could trigger a dangerous cardiac event at her age." What made this situation particularly challenging was timing and location. My mother lives in Boston, was visiting my sister in a small town outside Tampa, and was scheduled to be there for another 8 days. Her medication was sitting in her bathroom cabinet over 1,300 miles away. To complicate matters further, this happened over a holiday weekend when many doctors' offices were closed. In my decades as a pharmacist, I'd counseled countless patients on medication adherence, but it wasn't until this personal emergency that I truly understood the anxiety and potential danger of being separated from critical medications. My professional knowledge was now being tested in the most personal way possible. Many people don't realize this, but according to a survey by the American Pharmacists Association, nearly 75% of travelers have forgotten essential medication at least once. Even more concerning, only about 25% know the proper steps to take when this happens. I certainly didn't expect my own mother, who is usually meticulous about her medication, to become part of this statistic. But as I've learned both professionally and personally, these situations can happen to anyone, regardless of how careful they usually are. My mother had packed her small travel pill organizer, but in the rush of last-minute packing, she accidentally left it on her bathroom counter instead of putting it in her travel bag. It's a simple mistake that anyone could make, but one with potentially serious consequences for someone with a cardiac condition. After I calmed my sister down, I implemented what I now call the 3-location solution, a system I've refined since this incident and now teach to all seniors who travel. This approach addresses medication emergencies from multiple angles simultaneously to ensure you're covered no matter what happens. Let me walk you through exactly what we did, and more importantly, what you should do if you or a loved one ever faces a similar situation. The first step in the 3-location solution is to contact a local pharmacy immediately. I asked my sister to find the nearest pharmacy that was still open and drive my mother there right away. Many people don't realize that pharmacists have significant emergency dispensing authority in most states. In Florida, like many states, pharmacists can provide an emergency supply of maintenance medications, typically a 72-hour supply, even without a prescription on hand. I recommend keeping 3 copies of this document, one in your carry-on luggage, one with your medications, and one stored digitally, either emailed to yourself or saved in a password-protected cloud storage account you can access from any device. My wife Janet, who manages arthritis medications, keeps her medication travel passport in both our smartphones and printed in her travel purse. Second, always pack more medication than you need. My rule of thumb is the rule of thirds. Take enough medication for your planned trip duration, then add 1/3 more. For example, for a 9-day trip, bring enough for 12 days. This buffer accounts for unexpected travel delays, which seem increasingly common these days. Third, and this is critical, never pack all your medication in one place. I recommend what I call the split packing method. Place 1/3 of your medications in your carry-on bag, 1/3 in your personal item, like a purse or backpack, and 1/3 in your checked luggage if you're flying. If you're driving, split medications between your toiletry bag, your day bag, and another accessible location. This way, if any bag is lost or stolen, you still have access to some of your medication while you implement emergency procedures. My saxophone buddy Frank learned this lesson the hard way when his carry-on was stolen at a European train station. Because all his diabetes medication was in that one bag, he ended up in an emergency room in Munich. Had he split his supplies, he would have had backup medication available while arranging for replacements. Fourth, learn the specific pharmacy emergency rules for your destination before you travel. Pharmacy regulations vary significantly between states, and especially between countries. Some locations are more accommodating for emergency medications than others. Mexico, for instance, allows many prescription medications to be purchased without a prescription, while Japan has strict regulations that make obtaining emergency medications very difficult without seeing a local doctor first. When my wife Janet and I planned our trip to Arizona last year to visit the Grand Canyon, I called a pharmacy at our destination beforehand to understand their emergency medication policies. This simple 10-minute call gave me peace of mind, knowing exactly what we could do if we faced a medication emergency. Fifth, consider setting up medication reminders that work across time zones. One of the most common medication errors during travel is timing confusion due to time zone changes. Modern smartphone apps like MediSafe, the one I personally use, automatically adjust medication reminders when you change time zones. For medications where timing is critical, like anticoagulants or insulin, this feature can be life-saving. Now, I want to address something that many seniors worry about but few discuss openly: bringing medications through airport security. In my experience, both as a pharmacist and a traveler, TSA and other security agencies rarely question medications, even liquids, if they're clearly labeled and you have documentation. I recommend keeping medications in their original labeled containers when possible, especially when flying internationally. If you use a pill organizer like I do, bring the original bottles as backup identification. When I traveled to visit my son in California, I brought my organized medications in my weekly pill container, but kept the original bottles in my checked luggage, just in case I needed to verify what medications I was carrying. Let me share another personal story that reinforced the importance of these precautions. Last summer, my brother-in-law Richard was on a fishing trip in northern Michigan when he realized he'd forgotten his Parkinson's medication. He was staying in a cabin nearly 2 hours from the nearest major pharmacy. Because he'd previously set up an emergency medication plan following my advice after my mother's incident, he knew exactly what to do. Richard had a copy of his medication travel passport and called his home pharmacy immediately. They coordinated with a small local pharmacy that agreed to provide a 5-day emergency supply. He also had his neurologist's contact information readily available, which expedited the verification process. What could have been a trip-ending emergency was resolved in under 4 hours, allowing him to continue his vacation without his Parkinson's symptoms returning. This brings me to another important aspect of travel medication management: knowing which medications are truly time-sensitive and which can be briefly interrupted if necessary. As a pharmacist, I always educated my patients about their medication's criticality level, how quickly missing doses would lead to medical problems. For example, missing anticoagulants like warfarin can create risks within 24 to 36 hours. Missing medications for Parkinson's disease can cause significant symptom return within hours. On the other hand, many cholesterol medications can be briefly interrupted during travel emergencies without immediate consequences. This knowledge helps you prioritize which medications need emergency replacement first if you can't immediately replace everything. My mother's situation was particularly urgent because 2 of her cardiac medications, digoxin and her anticoagulant, have relatively short half-lives, meaning they leave the body quickly. Missing these for even a few days could have serious consequences for someone with atrial fibrillation and heart failure. When my mother returned from Florida after this incident, we implemented a new pre-travel system together. Now, before any trip, we go through what I call the trip checklist. Tally all medications and ensure adequate supplies are. Record all medication information in her medication travel passport I. Inform key contacts about her travel plans and medication needs P. Pack medications using the split packing method. This simple checklist has prevented any repeat of that frightening situation. My mother, now 92, still travels to visit family several times a year and manages her medications successfully despite the challenges of travel. I should mention that special considerations apply for travelers with cognitive impairments. When my neighbor Martha, who has early-stage dementia, travels to see her children, her medication management requires additional safeguards. Her daughter programmed a medication reminder watch that vibrates and displays simple instructions at medication times. They also established a daily check-in protocol where her daughter calls to verify she's taken her morning medications. For those caring for loved ones with memory concerns, technology can be a tremendous ally. Simple video calling to supervise medication administration, automated pill dispensers that lock between doses, and medication tracking apps that multiple family members can monitor are all tools I've recommended to families in similar situations. Another aspect of travel medication management that's rarely discussed is temperature sensitivity. Certain medications, particularly insulin, some antibiotics, and specific heart medications, can degrade if exposed to extreme temperatures. When traveling to very hot or cold destinations, proper medication storage becomes critical. During my pharmacy career, I saw several cases of medications becoming ineffective due to improper storage during travel. One memorable patient experienced a diabetes emergency because his insulin had been stored in a hot car during a summer road trip. Now I recommend insulated medication travel cases for temperature-sensitive medications. My friend Harold, who manages diabetes, uses a special cooling case for his insulin during his annual trips to Florida during summer months. Speaking of storage, medication privacy is another consideration when traveling. While it's important to have your medications accessible, displaying them in shared accommodations might not be desirable. My sister-in-law, who manages a chronic condition requiring multiple medications, uses discreet medication pouches that don't look like typical pill organizers when she travels with friends. These pouches maintain her privacy while keeping her medications organized and accessible. Let me address another critical aspect of travel medication management: insurance coverage for emergency medication replacements. Many insurance plans have vacation override provisions that allow early refills before travel, but few patients know to ask for this. I always recommend contacting your insurance company at least 2 weeks before international travel to understand your coverage for emergency medication replacement and to request vacation overrides if needed. When I worked as a pharmacist, I helped countless patients navigate these insurance requests. Sometimes a simple form or physician's note can make the difference between a covered replacement and an expensive out-of-pocket cost. My mother's Medicare Part D plan, for instance, has a specific provision for emergency vacation supplies, but it requires pre-authorization from her doctor. One of the most overlooked aspects of medication management during travel is the handling of time-sensitive medications that require strict timing intervals, like Parkinson's medications or certain antibiotics. For these medications, I recommend what I call the time-shifting method for long-distance travel, especially when crossing multiple time zones. The time-shifting method involves gradually adjusting medication times by 1 to 2 hours per day before your trip to align with your destination's schedule. This gradual adjustment is much safer than suddenly changing medication times by several hours upon arrival. When my friend David, who has Parkinson's, traveled to Europe last year, we created a 3-day time-shifting schedule before his departure that allowed his body to adjust gradually to the new medication timing. Now, I'd like to address a question I frequently receive. What about controlled substances like pain medications or anxiety medications? Are there special rules for traveling with these? The answer is yes, and the rules can be complex, especially for international travel. Some countries strictly prohibit certain medications that are commonly prescribed in the United States, even with proper documentation. For domestic travel, always keep controlled substances in their original labeled containers and carry a copy of your prescription or a doctor's note. For international travel, research your destination's regulations carefully. The International Narcotics Control Board and embassy websites provide country-specific information about medication restrictions. When my jazz band traveled to Canada for a performance, one member had to get special documentation for his anxiety medication to cross the border legally. Let's discuss what I believe is one of the most underappreciated travel medication tools: the International Pharmacy Locator. Several organizations maintain databases of reliable pharmacies worldwide, which can be invaluable in emergencies. The International Society of Travel Medicine provides a global pharmacy database that I recommend bookmarking before international trips. When my wife Janet and I visited London 2 years ago, I had already identified 3 pharmacies near our hotel, just in case we needed assistance with her arthritis medications. I should also mention the role of travel health insurance in medication emergencies. Standard travel insurance may not cover replacement medications, but specialized travel health policies often do. For seniors with complex medical needs, this additional coverage can be well worth the premium. My brother Michael, who takes specialized medication for a rare condition, never travels internationally without travel health insurance that specifically covers emergency prescription replacement. As we approach the end of our discussion, I want to emphasize the emotional aspect of medication management during travel. Travel should be enjoyable, not anxiety-provoking. The systems I've described aren't just about physical safety. They're about creating peace of mind that allows you to fully enjoy your travel experiences. After my mother's medication emergency in Florida, she admitted that she'd been anxious about traveling with her heart condition for years. Implementing our comprehensive medication travel plan actually increased her confidence and enjoyment of family visits. Last Christmas, she told me, "Bobby, I used to worry constantly about my medications when traveling. Now I know exactly what to do, and I can focus on enjoying time with my grandchildren instead." That's really what effective medication management is about: ensuring that health concerns don't prevent you from living fully and joyfully, whether at home or while exploring the world. Let me summarize the key elements of effective travel medication management. Create a comprehensive medication travel passport with all essential information. Use the rule of thirds for packing extra supplies. Implement the split packing method to avoid losing all medications at once. Research pharmacy emergency rules at your destination. Set up medication reminders that work across time zones. Understand the criticality level of each of your medications. Consider temperature sensitivity and storage needs. Research insurance coverage for emergency replacements. Use the time-shifting method for adjusting time-sensitive medications. Know the special rules for traveling with controlled substances. My mother's frightening experience in Florida could have ended very differently without a systematic approach to resolving her medication emergency. The three-location solution, working simultaneously with a local pharmacy, her home pharmacy, and researching emergency backup options, turned a potentially dangerous situation into a manageable challenge. I hope that by sharing these strategies, I can help you or your loved ones avoid similar emergencies. And if an emergency does occur, you'll have the knowledge to handle it calmly and effectively. If you found this information helpful, please consider subscribing to my channel and sharing this video with friends and family who travel. Next week, I'll be discussing how to effectively communicate with doctors about medication side effects, something I learned a lot about from both sides of the prescription counter. This is Dr. Bob, helping you take your medications correctly, whether you're at home or exploring the world. Remember, medications only work when you take them correctly. Let's make it simple. I'll see you next Wednesday. When they arrived at the pharmacy, I had my sister put me on speakerphone so I could speak directly with the pharmacist. I identified myself as a retired pharmacist and explained the situation. This professional courtesy helped, but it's important to know that any patient can request this emergency service. The pharmacist asked for 3 pieces of critical information: the exact names and dosages of my mother's medications, her regular pharmacy's contact information, and her prescribing doctor's details. This is why I now recommend everyone traveling carry a current medication list with exactly this information. The local pharmacist was able to verify my mother's prescription history through their interconnected pharmacy system and provided a 3-day emergency supply of her most critical heart medications. This bought us some time, but we still needed a more complete solution for the remainder of her trip. This leads to the second location in my 3-location solution: contacting your home pharmacy and physician. While my sister and mother were at the local pharmacy, I called my mother's regular pharmacy back in Boston. I explained the situation and asked them to contact her cardiologist for emergency prescription authorizations that could be transferred to the pharmacy in Florida. Now here's something many people don't realize. Your home pharmacist can be your greatest ally in medication emergencies while traveling. They already have your complete medication history, insurance information, and established relationships with your doctors. In my mother's case, her regular pharmacist not only contacted her cardiologist, but also helped navigate the insurance approval for filling prescriptions out of network. This process typically takes 24 to 48 hours, which is why the emergency supply from the first step is so crucial. It bridges the gap while the more complete solution is being arranged. By Thursday morning, the Florida pharmacy had received the transferred prescriptions and insurance approvals, allowing my mother to pick up enough medication to cover the rest of her visit. But what if you're traveling internationally or to a location where pharmacy access is limited? This is where the third location comes in: emergency medication resources. While working on the first 2 solutions, I also researched mail-order pharmacy options that could overnight her medications from her home to my sister's house. Several national pharmacy chains offer this service, though it tends to be expensive without insurance coverage. I also located the nearest urgent care center and hospital pharmacy to my sister's home as backup options. Hospital pharmacies can often dispense medications in emergency situations, even outside normal business hours. This 3-pronged approach, local pharmacy, home pharmacy coordination, and emergency backup resources, ensured that my mother had multiple paths to getting her medication. Throughout this process, I learned something critically important that I hadn't fully appreciated in my years behind the pharmacy counter: the emotional toll of medication emergencies. My mother, who is normally calm and collected, was deeply anxious about missing her heart medications. This anxiety itself caused her blood pressure to rise, potentially exacerbating her cardiac condition. This taught me that any good medication emergency plan must address both the physical need for medicine and the psychological stress of the situation. I had my sister check my mother's pulse and blood pressure regularly during this time and guided them through simple relaxation techniques I'd learned from cardiac patients over the years. The reassurance that we had a solid plan in place did as much good for her immediate condition as the emergency medication itself. After this experience, I developed a comprehensive travel medication plan that I've now used personally and shared with hundreds of seniors. Let me outline it for you, as it goes well beyond just what to do in an emergency. It helps prevent the emergency from happening in the first place. First, preparation is key. Before any trip, create what I call a medication travel passport. This is a document containing a complete list of all your medications, including generic and brand names. exact dosages and schedules, your primary pharmacy's contact information, including phone and fax numbers, your doctor's names and contact information, your insurance information, any drug allergies, a recent photo of each medication. This is especially helpful for identifying pills if they get mixed up during travel.